Welcome back to Newsday. Well, it's been almost 1.5 years since the Supreme Court of Nigeria delivered a judgment which was meant to grant full financial autonomy to the 774 local government areas in the country. By virtue of that judgment, governors of the 36 states in the Federation and the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory were mandated by the Apex Court to enhance the structures for immediate and direct transfer of funds meant for local government administration to those in charge at that level. However, that has not been the case, leading to the question of what's making it difficult. Malachy Ugwummadu is a lawyer, public affairs analyst, and former president of the Committee for the Defense of Human Rights. He joins us now to discuss the delay, why the judgment seems difficult to implement, and how the debacle might be successfully resolved. Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us on Newsday, and of course, Merry Christmas to you.
Thank you for the opportunity again, Temitope. I can hear you.
So why is the implementation of this judgment been delayed? Are the state governments acting in defiance of the Supreme Court, or are there genuine legal and administrative obstacles?
Well, I am largely a spectator like you, and I'm unable in that regard to give a specific reason why there has not been a full compliance with this epochal judgment of the Supreme Court. In short, it is one of the most profound judgments of the Supreme Court in 2025. And that the excitement that greeted it and the general acceptance in terms of deepening democracy and in particular federalism was so huge that no person thought several months down the line we could be giving reasons why there is no full compliance with that judgment of the court. But let's put it this way. Section 287, subsection 1, since we are talking of the Supreme Court now, mandates every person, every institution, every government functionary, no less the Nigerian people, to comply with decisions, orders, and judgments of courts. This is a Supreme Court judgment and need no excuse for non-compliance. So the fact that we're discussing this paints a very poor picture of the state of rule of law in our country. It does not demonstrate the kind of compliance with orders of court and judgments of court that can stabilize democratic practice and the whole principle of rule of law. But you know, I think that by and large, the fact that we have traveled too far in the woods and people were so used, as it were, to doing things arbitrarily could also be partly responsible. This is second-guessing what is happening. But whatever the case is, I think as a nation, we owe ourselves a duty and collectively too to ensure that the rule of law thrives in our country. And the way to guarantee that is to ensure that express judgments of court such as this are made to be effectual and effective and consequential, such that if there are states that are not able to bring this about, or if the processes from the federal government, we're talking about direct payments to local governments in the country, 774 of them. If the problem is from the Accountant General, we should know. If it is from the processes of deducting it from the Federation of Court, we should know. But the fact that the judgments of court that are explicit and positive are not complied with leaves a sour taste in the mouth and portends some serious dangers. Because once the Supreme Court has spoken, it ought to be the law. It ought to be the position of the law. And you cannot pick and choose which aspect of the law to comply with.
Mr. Ugwummadu, thank you for that, the statement you made. When you said that we cannot pick and choose which court order or parts of rule of law we can choose to implement or ignore, it's something that we've seen repeated over time. When you also stated that we have a collective duty to ensure that rule of law is effectual, what are the powers available to the everyday Nigerian when you're talking about the aspect of collective duty to ensure that we see that rule of law is implemented as you stated?
Okay, thank you, Cynthia. Although I struggled to hear the question you put across to me, but this is the point, the much I gathered. You know, the whole construct of democracy itself is not hanging in the air. There are pillars of democratic setting and democratic experimentations. It talks about the rule of law. It talks about plurality of political parties. It talks about the independence of the judiciary. It talks about, more importantly, the strong, viral civil society, and of course the media. That civil society is where you and I belong. In other words, you could say what coercive powers does the ordinary man, what coercive power does he have to bring about compliance of judgments of court? What influence does he wield? Now, the media, for instance, you in particular, imagine on the 26th, today is 26th, and you're all everywhere looking for people who will give effect in terms of proper clarity and explanation to the position of the law as handed down by the Supreme Court of this country. That is huge. There is enough sensitization, there is enough education, there is enough enlightenment, if not understanding of this position of the law as handed up down, but that is already profound in the sense that people are now armed with the proper information, with the proper knowledge, enough sensitization to say, wait a minute, where is this problem coming from? How do we, as a people who are supposed to be beneficiaries of this judgment, begin to organize ourselves and pressure the system in a way that monies meant or standing to the credit of each local government is sent directly to the local government? You'll be shocked that in few weeks and months, if we coordinate our activities, you will see that in each of the 774 local governments, there will be serious agitations. And if you align that with the statement of the president in his Christmas Day broadcast, you will see that there is already a position. Not to talk of the position of Algon. In short, I think it was on your station that I watched the president of Algon and one other guest, in which they were espousing the fact that this is not the problem of the state as such. It is the problem of the federal government that ought to ensure that these payments go straight to the local government accounts. So, by and large, I make the point that it starts with what you are doing at the moment, which is enlightening the public. It starts with proper conscientization. It starts with the resolve of the people who have been victims of this anomaly in the last decades to now mobilize, organize themselves in a way that empowers them to ask the proper question and in a way that makes them to get resolved to push for that which they are entitled to. By and large, this is an idea that is meant to bring governance down to the people and then break down to a larger sense the monopoly that the states have had over the local governments. And I think those are the ways to bring about the fulfillment of this judgment.
No, very well said. But I'm wondering if there are gaps in the Constitution or the relevant laws that make enforcement difficult. Should the National Assembly, or what role should the National Assembly play in resolving this debacle?
That your concern is not hanging in the air. The Constitution is still what it is. What the Supreme Court has managed to do is to handle what we call the case law. The case law emanates from practical intervention or adjudication of the courts with respect to recondite areas of the law. What I mean by that is that the court sits as a court, the cases are brought to them. This time around, they came straight to to invoke the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court, being a dispute that is between states and the federal government. And the Supreme Court took advantage of that to hand down a judgment giving light, giving clarity, and pronouncing on the constitutional provision relating to what you have, the provisions of the Constitution. You recall that the Constitution makes that elaborate provision in which monies standing to the credit of the local government will have to go to a joint state and local government account, JAC, and from where the, if you like, distribution occurs. But what the experience has been that over the years, over the decades, the governors of each state hijack these monies meant for the local government and barely deal with salaries and then take over the management and the spending of the rest. So what this Supreme Court had done is to break that jinx. But having done that, there was no corresponding amendment of that section 162 of the Constitution that empowers this joint account. However, the Supreme Court gave clarity and full explanation to that. Recall that in the past, there were no electronic transfers of money. This started just about 25, 26 years ago, in year 2000. Before then, it used to be that the accountant generals and commissioners of finance in particular will have to travel all the way to Abuja to have their allocations. Now, to avoid all of those, in which you will, have that huge movement, it was resolved, and rightly too at that time, that instead of this frequent movement, let every payment meant for the local government in the respective states be paid to that particular joint account, from where the distribution will occur. Now, that was rational then. But with a lot of water has passed under the bridge, we have advanced technologically, and there have been issues, even in terms of proper appropriation and allocation of those funds. And where we are now is that there was never an intention. The drafters of the Constitution never intended that monies meant for local government will be appropriated, will be cornered by the state governments. And that what that case has done is to bring this clarity in which local governments will have their entitlements and will be able to utilize it for the benefit of the people directly from the source. And that was the essence of that judgment. So now that the judgment have been passed down, and I have quoted to you copiously that section 287 subsection 1 says that every judgment of the Supreme Court must be obeyed. Section 287 subsection 2 says that of Court of Appeal must be obeyed. Section 287 subsection 3 says the judgment of the states, including the Federal High Court, must be obeyed. If that is the position of the law, and you have other developments incidental to that, then it has to be checked, whether politically or otherwise. But essentially, it is important to note that where there is continued disobedience of the court order, no less that of the Supreme Court, we also have, we're not hamstrung. There is what you call contempt of court. And the first thing is to identify those who are in contempt of the judgment of the Supreme Court. And there are processes.
Fantastic. Well said, Mr. Ugwummadu. Now, when it comes to the Governors Association, there have been remarks that they've been conspicuously quiet. If you could, I don't want to use the word speculate, but if you could take a wild guess, would you say that they might be organizing coordinated resistance or accepting defeat and strategizing control through other means?
The temptation to be involved in guesswork. Essentially, what we do is to deal with facts and then bring the law to bear on those facts. But Cynthia, I know you will always insist. Now, if you want me to travel that route, you could see that it was a very, very convenient practice for governors at subnational levels. And they were by far richer than they are entitled to, talking about being in control of that pool of funds that belongs to the state and also to the local government. And if you understand the character of the state we find ourselves and the nature of the politics we play here, you cannot, in fact, you undermine the powers of the governors to your own peril. So much so that it is almost obvious that whoever emerges as a local government chairman or chairlady, as the case may be, in any state, owes that to the mercy of the governor. So that control, that sphere of influence, that, if you like, that overbearing capacity to control all that happens within the state is what sustained that practice, however injurious it has been to the people at the grassroots level. So if you talk of the conspiracy theory, I will subscribe to it, even if at the moment it still exists within the realms of speculation. But there is every factor that conspires to lead to the conclusion that you want me to arrive at. And you could see that the resistance we have also had so far is not so much from the local government or from the federal government. It is from the state governors. If you like, you could say that they may have some conspirators, some collaborators within the federal structure, who probably are also beneficiaries, because it's about having so much funds, slush funds, with which you throw out patronages here and there and circumvent the processes in a way that empowers you but disables the people at the grassroots. So you could say, yes, that's systemic, but the whole judgment is meant to break that jinx, and we must stay at it and ensure that the judgment is enforced.
Very well said. Lawyer Malachy Ugwummadu, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday.